Hey, good afternoon. Scott Luton, Greg White with you here at Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Greg, you're on the move. How you doing?
Live from the field, Scott. Am I coming in okay?
You can. You can. So, Greg, you are in basically downtown Atlanta at the ATDC, right?
Yeah, the Atlanta Technology Development Center, the big incubator, the Georgia Tech incubator. So, visiting one of our partners and one of the companies that I advise. Wrong shoulder, Verison.
I was about to say you're
Yeah,
advising one of the
the
largest.
strategic planning.
Well, great to see you. I think we've got just a heads up. We've got a little bit of a delay, I think, between our connection, but we'll work
Yeah,
through that today. And welcome everybody. Shernevis is already here. Shernevis, great to see you. I hope this finds you and your family well and your whole neighborhood. I know that you are working through that second wave and we're with you. So we're going to touch on that here momentarily, but Shernevis, hope this finds you well. And we'll get back to saying hello to everyone else here in a minute. But today, Greg, we've got a special guest,
yes, Scott.
Lora Cecere, founder of Supply Chain Insights, amongst other things, and one of the most respected voices in global business. So we're looking forward to a great conversation today, right?
Truth teller, all knowing, all seeing. Yes, I am really looking forward to this, and especially what she's going to share. Right?
Agreed.
Which I'm not
Agreed.
gonna I'm not gonna give away.
Good. It is going to be, hey, if you love supply chain and if you're supply chain nerds like we are, it is going to be manna from heaven. So stay tuned for a great conversation here today. Now, let's tackle a few programming notes, and then we're going to say hello, and then we're going to bring in our special guest here today. So, and by the way, supply chains we admire. That's going to be the main thrust today. So stay tuned for a great conversation. But most importantly today, I want to encourage everyone, our friends Srinivas and others are in India fighting through that a really tough second wave of the pandemic. Our hearts and prayers and thoughts and action are with our friends there. So we're very proud to support these nonprofit efforts to get needed resources to our friends in India. So we challenge you, encourage you, hey, give small, give big, whatever you can do, but you can check out the effort, one of the many noble efforts at vibha.org, where every I've got a buddy over here that's ready to jump on the live stream, but every dollar is going to
we need to give him a
effort. Every dollar is going to this effort. So vibha.org or our friends at Vector Global Logistics are helping marshal the resources. And if you've got some ideas for how you or your organization can help out there, shoot them a note at india@vectorgl.com. All right. So, Greg, on a much, much lighter note, talk to us. So we're approaching 50 episodes of Tequila Sunrise. I think this is number 42.
Holy mackerel.
Tell us about the episode you dropped this week.
Yeah, so Saina Zorlu is one of the venture partners at Kubera Venture Capital, also a previous founder, and now two big events, not only a stealth startup founder herself, but a brand new mom. So as if she didn't have enough to do, and gosh, don't you think that ought to be? She also joined me on the show. All of this episode was literally inspired by an email where I said, I'm struggling with this aspect of evaluating these companies. And she sent me this email that just broke it down so simply. I said, that is an episode. Let's talk about it. So she is decoding the mysteries of founder and investor discussions and relationships. It's when you think you're saying one thing, the investors are hearing another. Or, for instance, one of the things we talked about is here's what founders think money is used for, what funding buys them, and here's what investors are willing to invest funding to see accomplished by a company. I'll just give you a quick thing that every founder should know and eliminate from their vernacular, and that is funding does not buy you runway. It does not buy you time. So you'll have to listen in for the rest of it. Or
rules to live by, to found by, and to lead your startup by. So great conversation. I've listened to half of it, and one of my favorites already is how she talks about how technology is the ultimate democratizer. So great conversation, and y'all can find that wherever you get your podcast from. Tequila Sunrise with a TECH. Hey, we've got several great webinars coming up, including this one where we're partnering with our friends at Transplace. It's all going to be about practical, successful, real innovations in supply chain. It's been one of the great silver linings of all this, right? So join Greg and I as we talk with Tracy Rosser on the 8th of June. June's going to just right around the corner, Greg. But before we get to June, this week has been
feels like it's here.
Yes, it does. Except the weather outside here in Atlanta, it's got to be 65 degrees here today, which is
right.
Odd.
That feels like February.
Right. But before we get to June, tomorrow, this has been a week of live streams. We got an awesome one here today. Tomorrow, we've got Peggy Gulick with Kohler and Billy Taylor, who's on the board of directors with the Association for Manufacturing Excellence, joining us for a great conversation tomorrow at 12 noon. So don't miss that either. Okay. So Greg, before we get all of that good stuff, we have got one of our favorite conversations, monthly conversations right here at Supply Chain Now with the one and only Lora Cecere, founder of Supply Chain Insight. So let's go ahead and welcome Lora in. Lora, good afternoon. How you doing?
Couldn't do better. Thank you.
Well, great to see you. We've as always, we enjoyed the pre-show conversations. We've enjoyed kind of our touches between the touches, so to speak. And I tell you, we've been diving deeper and deeper into the supply chains we admire here today. But we're going to get to all that in a minute. So welcome to today's live stream.
Thanks.
Okay. So Gregory, any idea of what, I like to track these national days. They're so creative. There's a national day for everything, international day for plenty of things too. Any idea of what we're celebrating today?
I don't know. You're going to have to clue me in. I'm sorry. You know what? I think we need to harken back to April 29th, which is National Supply Chain Day. We were actually, I think, not on the air on that day, right? But I just, so everyone knows, I did talk to the founder of National Supply Chain Day, Mary Kate Love, and all is well there. Big celebration plan for next year. So let's hear what's going on this year.
So today, May 13th, it is National Apple Pie Day. It is International Hummus Day and National Fruit Cocktail Day. So the question, the hard-hitting question here is and we'll start with Lora first. Which of those three celebrated fruits, beverages, you name it, would you make a lunch out of?
I think all three. I'm a big fan of all three.
Yes, we are too. So you're saying a well-balanced approach to lunch.
You need a little bit of sugar from that apple pie. Fruit cocktail counts as fruit. Hummus is good for you. Yeah, all three.
All right. So Greg, what about you?
I like Lora, refuse to be a slave to the tyranny of the or. I am into the freedom of the and. So yes, hummus and pie and fruit cocktail. Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, fruit cocktail throws you back to your kids, your childhood, doesn't it? I remember fruit cocktail.
I'm just waiting, Greg, for National Chardonnay Day, or
Oh, what is the yes? Every day is rosé, or rosé every day. There's some. I'm with you. Chardonnay is our favorite. Right. So one more fun question before we get to all the stuff that's going on. So today is also Darius Rucker's birthday. He was born on this date back in 1966. He's one of our family's favorite artists, whether it's Hootie and the Blowfish or his more recent country stuff, which I still love. Clay was digging on Darius earlier. And big thanks, of course, to Amanda and Clay behind the scenes for making the production happen. So with that said, that's one of our favorites here amongst others. We were talking about Kenny Rogers in the pre-show, Lora. Well, he's also one of our favorites. In fact, we named a hound after Kenny Rogers. And that hound proceeded to run away. So maybe that was a wrong name to go with. But let's talk about
when to hold him.
Very nice, Greg. Very nice. That is not on my script. Very nice. But Lora, So Darius Rucker, one of our favorites. What's one of your instant artists or bands that come to mind when you talk about your favorite music?
So when I write, I listen to Chris Singleton or the Queen. I have a dog by the name of Freddie Mercury for a reason.
Oh, I love that.
Very cool.
Laura, we keep uncovering some synergies between us here. All right. So Freddie Mercury, I know you've got 3 dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Is Freddie the best acting or the least acting dog?
He's the young guy. He's the guy that's always in trouble.
Okay. Oh, I love that.
Appropriately named.
Yeah, appropriately named.
What a great star.
Yes. Movie that came out a couple years ago about the whole Queen journey and Freddie's journey. It was a wonderful movie. Okay, Greg, what about you? I know you're a big music fan.
Yeah, it's I would have to say going all the way back to Van Halen is, that's my get going music right now. One of their songs is that's when I start running or exercising. That's the one I always open with. And then, gosh, I don't know, just everything, man. I'm a huge Chris Singleton fan, single-handedly saving country music from hick hop.
Well,
I love hip hop music.
See, we start talking music.
I love hip hop music and I love country music, but I don't love them together. So,
well, hey, we've got speaking of music. This just came to me. We're going to be having, if y'all remember, Special Ed from Yo MTV Raps. He's going to be joining us on an episode with The Buzz with Kevin L. Jackson. He is now using blockchain to protect IP. So, and we'll probably talk about little old school rap when he makes an appearance. Let's share a couple of comments here from folks in the cheap seats. Chia says Moscato here. We were talking our favorite adult beverages earlier.
Funny how quickly we moved to wine.
From per cocktail, right?
Right. Sylvia, of course, rightly so. Darius I think he was born in North Charleston, if I'm not mistaken. But regardless, he's always going to be tied to the Charleston, the holy city. So Sylvia, I hope this finds you well. Peter, great point, because today is the end of Ramadan. So, we do hope that we get, violence there in the Middle East has been the worst, I think, going back 7 or 8 years now. So hopefully we can get that settled down in the hours to come. Let's see. On a much lighter note, Clay says that the Steel Drivers debut is my favorite album of all time. Is that I should know this. Is that Queen or Chris Singleton?
Chris, yeah, that's his bluegrass band. Sorry, I said Singleton, didn't I? It's Stapleton.
Yes,
Stapleton. Yeah,
Stapleton.
That's the bluegrass band before he went solo.
Oh, I gotcha. See, I'm still figuring out some of the bluegrass aspect of country music. Let's see here. Peter says, yes, that was my first concert ever. Van Halen, first album tour in the 80s. How about that? I wonder if he still has his tickets. And Peter, hope this finds you well. Great to have you here. Rhonda, also a big Van Halen fan. All the rock bands of the 70s and 80s, the hair bands. It's funny. I never was into the hair bands, but my son is a big fan of all the hair bands. So he's got an old soul. But nevertheless, okay. So we're ready.
Really?
We've had enough. Yes, we've had enough fun with food and adult beverages and music. We could probably talk for hours about all of that stuff. But we've got to get to the news of the day. We're going to start with and Laura. There's no shortage of news out there, right? It's been a really busy week. And Clay says, I don't think Clay says I didn't emphasize Peter's yes enough. Thank you, Clay. I got to work on my monopia. What's that word? Anyway, let's talk about the news. So much going on. Mark Lohr, the former e-commerce chief at Walmart, has built a venture capital firm with former major leaguer Alex Rodriguez. Retailers, on a related note, they have basically tripled their investment on retail technology. If you look at first quarter over 2021 over first quarter 2020. And then up in your neck of the woods, Laura, Amazon Air added to its growing operations, added a daily cargo service at Pittsburgh International Airport today. And then down here in the Southeast, which still has national and certainly regional repercussions, looks like Colonial Pipeline, their primary operations appear to be back online today after about a week's worth of disruption. So, but Laura, what is one, out of all of that and beyond, what's a news story that you're tracking right now?
The Forbes article that I'm writing and hope to get up today is that when I talk to my software technologists that I cover, many of them have operations in India, and they have 10 to 15% illness with COVID with their developers. And so I'm expecting that supply chain leaders are going to have serious delays in software development. And most of the business process outsourcing in India, I think, will have some serious shutdowns. I think on that Southeast fuel issue, horrible, security issue. But what I found interesting in that scenario is that 25% of the oil tankers are not moving because of the lack of drivers. And so, we could have responded quicker if we had more drivers.
Yeah, excellent point. And many analysts are pointing to that back on the cybersecurity aspect of it, of a sign of things to come. And we all hope that's not the case. But lots of the challenges are growing and they're getting more complex. And
sorry, I think my Amazon guy is at the front door, so I'm going to go on mute.
Okay. Hey, that's live streams. That's what happens, right? We all love dogs.
Know we're live.
That's right. We all love our dogs, so that happens to us all the time. Okay, so Greg, while Amazon wraps up its operations there in Pennsylvania, what is one news story that you're tracking?
Well, I can't help but track this Colonial Pipeline thing. Despite their statements otherwise, I believe it's Reuters is reporting that they did pay $5 million ransom to the hacker gang. At least that's what I heard on the radio on the way here.
Really?
So that's a dangerous precedent to set, but all of the things being equal, I guess they had to do it.
It's awful, isn't it? Just the implications of state and local government. Yeah, just horrific implications.
I completely agree. So we'll, but on a lighter note, and there's always good news if you look for it, whether it was consumer driven, paranoia driven, you name it, at least we hope to get some normalcy at the pump. We were certainly seeing shortages in our neck of the woods in Metro Atlanta. In fact, Atlanta, I think, was one of the hardest areas hit regionally. Let's move right. I've got a couple of questions. We weren't
hardest hit by supply. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Greg.
Sorry, that delay is killing me. But we weren't hardest hit by supply. We were hardest hit by panic buying. And by the way, it's interesting because I've waited longer in line for gas on an average Saturday afternoon than I did yesterday. And I think it was just timing. The gas station near us had run out of fuel. When my wife was looking for gas, I just went there kind of blindly, didn't check any apps or anything. And I waited like 10 minutes to get gas.
Really?
So,
well, talk about being in the right spot at the right time. This Gas Buddy app, you couldn't pay for better advertising. But I agree with you, Greg. And the other thing I think it's interesting, going back to Laura's point, is the truck driver shortage and just that huge dilemma. It is going to keep impacting more and more and more until we're able to really, in a root cause manner, fix it, or at least address it in a more meaningful, sustainable manner. So. Got to love on our truck drivers. They do such a great job keeping supply chains moving and everything moving. All right, on the dog front, we all are huge dog fans. I'm surprised my dogs haven't gone crazy today. Clay says guard dog is a good dog. I agree. Sylvia says, "Hey, was that Freddie?"
No, it's not Freddie. It's Grayson.
Okay, let's see here, and then back on the news front here, Charles Heater says Microsoft's Azure blockchain as a service is going to be shut down. I missed that headline. Did y'all see that today?
I did. And I think that's a really good point. A lot of these shiny object tools turn out they don't have so much shine. So I think this is a good point.
Yeah, agreed. And then one other thing that Peter Bollet all night and all day dropped in my our LinkedIn inbox yesterday is I-40 at some juncture in, I think, Mississippi or Alabama. It was, they were diverting traffic because there was a crack in one of the overpasses. So as if it seemed to be temporary, which is thankful, and the overpass didn't drop like it did up near the Chattanooga area a little while back. But it just really brings up, once again, in fact, the pipeline to some degree and interstate infrastructure, right? We got some catching up to do, right?
We do. And there's a lot of politics in that discussion that I'm going to sidestep.
I'm with you. Putting politics aside, we've got to, as we all know, what is apolitical, we got to protect our national energy infrastructure. We've got to, some of the lack security around even nuclear facilities. And then just the highways and byways, the interstates, the railroad, the protecting water. I mean, the American Society for Civil Engineers, I believe, is a group, ASCE. They put out a great holistic infrastructure report, I think every 2 years, I believe. And while the grade came up this year, Laura, still, they really list all the areas that we've got to get addressed. But we'll save that for another day.
Yeah, it's pretty ugly. It's worth reading, and we need a real infrastructure bill. I worry about the ports. I think this morning we had 33 boats off of Long Beach, and we shut down the port of Montreal, and we just can't get the goods we need to get through those ports. So. And it's interesting also the coverage that we're getting on the automotive semiconductor shortage. Everyone's covering it like, automotive shutting down. They're not really covering the fact that automotive companies aren't good supply chain partners. They don't share good data. And
right.
I found the interview with TSMC interesting because they said if automotive hadn't shut down or had given them better communication about starting up, they wouldn't have the issues. And so, framing that issue is also interesting to watch in the press.
Excellent point. And Greg, I know you want to jump. I'm going to come back to you for one more news observation, but it's really interesting. Weeks ago, we talked about this kind of this article on the situation, and they were quoting an attorney that clearly has never worked in supply chain about the automotive supply chain managers were telling them, get prepared, the demand's coming back. But they can tell them all they want if they don't issue POs and put some skin in the game so that their suppliers will move and take action based on what they say is coming. That, to your point, Laura, having supplied automotive companies, they use that big hammer regularly, and in this case, it came back to bite them a bit.
Yeah, the big stick bit them, and
yes.
And I work with a company that is a multinational, and they have different divisions, and one of the divisions serviced automotive, and they totally shut down with COVID-19, and we're totally surprised by the rebound in the automotive industry. And I'm like, we can get weekly sales of cars. It's easy data to get. Nobody should be surprised, and nobody should be, sleeping at the switch.
Yeah, agreed. All right, Greg, you've got the last comment here before we move on to supply chains we admire.
Yeah, well, typically, and I think it's hard to say it better than Laura did, automotive OEMs are not good. They're not good supply chain partners, and they do tend to wield a stick rather than to collaborate, and it's hurt them again. And of course, their natural reaction is to go to the government for assistance when they've created an issue of their own doing. So it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. I really think it will shake out before, hopefully, the government does something stupid and subsidize semiconductor production in the States or something like that.
Yeah, the automotive industry would be well served to plant a field of carrots, right? It's more about carrots than sticks.
Yes, agreed. A
Yes.
couple of comments
Amen.
here. So Gary says, and I think he meant to say, I can't even get ping golf clubs for 3 months. I think we've seen that on couches. We've seen that on furniture, cars, even. for sure. So, Gary, I hope your golf game can make it over the next 3 months. Peter is pointing out a great post you shared yesterday, and Peter would love to see what that was. Laura, did you have one big post yesterday that you want to mention?
Well, I posted two things yesterday. One was the leadership series that I'm doing on my podcast. I woke up one day and I realized that a lot of the people that were my associates in supply chain were either dying or ill or, they changed jobs. And I'm like, I really need to get these people on podcasts to talk about leadership. So I formed a list and I asked people to speak on leadership. So Rick Davis spoke on influence management. Rick went through 28 organization changes at Kellogg and he survived. It's an amazing story. And Nick Lynch to talk about building a guiding coalition to do new innovation. And then my next podcast is with Jane Kaiser of Bayer on innovation versus standardization and how do we draw the line and what is the role of the leader to drive innovation, which also we talk about the driven woman and, Jane and I are a bit driven and, our careers in supply chain. So I think that's a good one. Peter also might be referencing the backwards bike video that I posted yesterday. As many people know, I'm sponsoring or working with Project Zebra, which is something that I push the industry to do, which is how do we rethink the art of the possible and planning with what's happening in analytics? Why do we have planners, right? It's 3% of the back office. Why do we not have self-service planning? Why do we not have what-if analysis? Why do we not have, the ability to really understand probabilities and redefine planning? And so I built an open source group with 9 business leaders, 4 academics, and ASCM in '09 to really say, let's start to redefine planning. And one of the issues I've had in facilitating the group is unlearning what they know today about planning. And this backward bike video is a good, wake up call, because everybody says, I know how to ride a bike, right? Once you ride a bike, it comes back naturally. But this backward bike, changes the equilibrium.
Right.
And it's about the journey of unlearning. And it's a great video.
I love it. And so many things are in the process or will be redefined as we get into, hopefully for all countries, the post-pandemic environment. So excellent point. I'm going to check that out, Laura. All right. So I want to share a couple more comments and we're going to keep driving. Brandy mentions that the semiconductor industry does the same thing to her suppliers. Let's see here. Rhonda also is sharing, looks like some resources around digital media and social media after today's live stream. So thanks for that, Rhonda. Let's see. And Nanda is back with us. Nanda is, let's see here, from Norway. So Nanda, great. Look forward to your contributions here today. Okay. So finally, we could talk, let's see, food, music, adult beverages, and the news of the day for hours on end. But let's talk about this Supply Chains to Admire, the 2020 edition. So, Greg, you and I were chatting about that before Laura joined us here today, and we're chatting about some of the companies that she was reporting on, and really just kind of how her analysis, her team's analysis, kind of stands out from so many other awards out there in industry, right?
Yeah, it's a completely neutral take. I mean, that's what I love about it is there's no assuming that the biggest are the best. There's no, dare I say, pandering to those who are the biggest clients. There's none of that. And I think that is something that it's particularly refreshing for someone who is working always with small supply chain tech companies or companies, because you really don't have a chance any other way. It's not exactly pay for play, but there is obviously some consideration when one particular vendor can get you moved out of a particular, let's say, parallelogram in a group of parallelograms that are somewhat magical. So I think the objectivity of it is valuable both to the technology providers, because she challenges us. And as I've said before, I've been challenged by Lora. It's enlightening, it's frightening, but in the end, it helps you improve your business, but it also serves the practitioner best. And I think that's an important part of the service that Lora provides.
Excellent point. Unbeholden is the the term that comes to my mind, at least. So we've got a lot more homework to do, though. But Lora, for starters, clearly the 2020 Supply Chains to Admire is not a popularity contest. But what's the genesis behind it? Where did it all start?
Well, Greg, I just want to say that Tough Lora Love, I hope, has helped a lot of people. And let's talk about the Supply Chains to Admire. So I used to work at a company called AMR Research, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't remember AMR Research, but AMR was very focused on analyst information for business leaders. It was the firm in Boston focused on supply chain management. And AMR developed the AMR supply chain, which is now the Gartner rating system. And we were looking at, who has the best supply chain. And it's 50% opinion. And so there is basically a call. All companies are put, on a sheet, and people are asked to rate which companies are the best supply chains. And so the Gartner work is 50% opinion. And then it looks at 3 years of data on inventory and margin. And, they change some of the metrics year to year. But, 3 years isn't sufficient, because it takes, 4 to 5 years to really turn a big ship around. And also, it doesn't go across all sizes of companies. And so that was a wake-up call for me to say, let's look at all companies, all manufacturing, all retailing companies, irrespective of size, and let's divide them into peer groups, because the Gartner work doesn't divide companies into peer groups. So it basically compares chemical companies to semiconductor companies and automotive companies to retail, puts them all in a spreadsheet and shakes them up. So we divide companies into 28 peer groups, and that was a tough thing because we've argued about peer groups for a decade. Wow. And then we look at 9 years of data, and we look at the intersection of growth and margin and inventory turns, and growth and return on invested capital. And we look at, is there improvement at those intersections? Because you can't just look at metrics individually. And are they outperforming their peer group? And one of the things I found is that companies that are performing the worst will drive improvement the fastest. So it's sort of like losing weight. The more weight you've got to lose, the faster it'll come off. And companies that are really good at supply chain will be better performers than their peer group, but they'll be making small incremental improvements. And so we look at 620 companies, and we pull down the data from a syndicated data provider called Y-Charts. It takes us about 3.5 months to do the analysis. We do orbit charts on those intersections of all the companies, and we look at how they did against peer group, and then we select the winners. And the winners are based upon, did the company drive improvement to a greater degree than 2/3 of the peer group? Were they performing above average on growth, margin, inventory turns, and return on invested capital? They have to be in all of those categories. And are they outperforming the peer group in either price to tangible book or market capitalization, which translates to value? So it's improvement, performance, and value. And, 20 to 22 companies usually rise to the top, and some companies are year-over-year winners.
Yes.
And this year we have 21 winners, and we'll have a webinar third week in June where we'll present the winners. And what I'm doing right now is basically telling the winners they're winners because I want them to speak at my annual conference and want to write their story, and preparing for that webinar the third week in June.
Wonderful. All right, so we got to back up. We got to back up a little bit. Greg, as you and I were chatting about the wealth of information that is going to be available for all industry professionals, which I love that about your MO, Laura. But you identified 5 things in particulars, and there's a lot more, but these things kind of jumped to my in front of my eyeballs here. So leaders, these are 5 general traits that Laura, the research, really found. So it's data-driven. Leaders focus on horizontal processes. They build balanced scorecards. There's a lot of consistency in their leadership and culture, which I love that one. Strong planning and network design. And this last one, clarity of supply chain excellence. Clarity. So, Greg, before we get Laura to speak on 1 or 2 of those and why it's so important and kind of maybe the story behind it, which of those jumps out to you and really, yes, this is what leaders do?
Well, I mean, as it goes to supply chain, I think it's got to go to results. It's number 5. It's a clear result in terms of in terms of performing, and all of those other things lend to that. And frankly, that's the way good companies are run, is you start with the goal in mind and you work your way back through the tactics, the objectives, the goals, and activities that get you there. And then you measure, to go right back up to the top, you measure to assure that you are getting there, or to confirm that you're on or off the track, and then you adapt to assure that you're getting there. So it all comes back to performance. In truth, we say this all the time, Scott: no product, no program, right? So we have a very simple metric in supply chain. It is deliver on time what the customer wants. So, that I think that has to be the number 1. Now, there are a lot of other leadership traits and leadership activities in there, but all of them really ultimately lead to performance.
And the interesting thing, Greg, is that most people can't see their data. Only 29% of people can see total cost. And I haven't interviewed anyone that can see margin. And what we have is a pretty big deterioration of margin based upon traditional marketing programs. And so what you find in the supply chains to admire is those that are very marketing driven versus market driven don't rank because of that slippage in margin and the fact that they didn't reach their growth objectives.
Interesting.
All right. Yeah, it is interesting. We're scraping just the tip of the iceberg here. We definitely want to encourage folks to not only get a copy of the 2020 Supply Chains to Admire, but hopefully we can drop the link to the webinar in the show notes if we can get that. All right, I want to pose this question to you both, Greg and Laura, and it comes from Nanda. As the economy begins to revive, he says, we are seeing supply chains plunge into one or the other crises. What is your take on this? Is supply chain, after all these years, still so vulnerable? What can we all do as a supply chain community to help stop further surprise crises in the near future? Any comments there? And Laura, why don't we start with you?
Well, it's interesting because I think we took a lot for granted, and that logistics would always be available. We just needed to negotiate price. We could build global supply chains on the back of an Excel spreadsheet, and people would deliver, and there wouldn't be reliability issues because we chased lower cost of labor, lower cost of materials. We built global supply chains, and we really didn't test them. Only 9% of companies actively design their supply chains. Only 1% actually design buffer strategies for form and function. And over the last decade, we've seen a decline in expertise and understanding for planning and the ability to really build resilience because we've invested in transactional systems and procurement efficiency. We have not really invested in decision support and building the robust supply chain capabilities. And I think it's a wonderful wake-up call for the basics. We were better prepared in the 1990s for what happened today than we were in this last decade. And the reason is that I think we just fell asleep at the switch and assumed that reliability was just always going to be there in logistics and supply.
Wow. Okay. So, Greg, Laura shared a lot of good stuff there. Floor is yours, sir.
Well, there's two things. One is supply chain, like so many topics, even the weather, has become hyperbolic, and everything that happens is exacerbated through how it's reported. And because it gets views, it gets likes, it gets advertisers, supply chain is news suddenly. Hey, Ben. And so I think that there's some aspect of that. But the truth is, as Laura stated so eloquently, supply chain has always been managed as a cost management exercise, and it is in fact not. It is a risk management exercise, cost being one of the key risks. But again, to go back to the previous portion of the discussion, no product, no program. It doesn't matter how low cost your supply chain is if it doesn't get the damn product to the client. So we have to foundationally change our paradigm as supply chain professionals to consider this a risk management exercise, with cost just being considered one of those risks. That's how we change and stay clear of those surprises.
And I think that we have too narrow of a thread going on risk, right? Risk isn't, whether I have D and B tell me if somebody pays their bills, or risk isn't, cash flow based on what, some of the software providers. Risk comes with design. It comes with the ability to have information for employees. It comes with being able to have data that's relevant and timely. And I think that most companies, because they've invested in transactional systems, the supply chain has become more functional and more isolated. And, procurement operates in an island, logistics operates in an island. Those islands are bigger and wider than they used to be, and we got to change it.
Yeah, agreed. No longer are they atolls.
Yeah.
They're full-blown island countries, and they operate very independently sometimes, which holds us all back. I love your comment about how we were more prepared in the 90s for what we're facing now as a craft, as a industry than we are today. I got to share some of these comments here. So Peter also responds, Ananda. He says his personal thoughts are, you got to work on your supplier diversity. The supply chain is and will always be susceptible to fragility as it relies on sea, land, and rail to deliver goods. Having multiple sources of reliable products will allow you to be flexible. This, of course, fails when it's a proprietary product. Excellent point there. Enrique, going back to kind of some of the cultural things that you are both sharing earlier, results only mentality. That I'm assuming he's saying that that's part of the problem, perhaps. Let's say, Azalea, hope this finds you well. Great to have you here. Isn't this how we isn't this how we learn lean, agile, Six Sigma, etc.? Software development companies have been a model for so many performance and efficiency practices. Would you agree with that, Laura and Greg?
No.
Okay.
I wouldn't. I mean, I think the software development model is a distinctly different model than a product model. And I really think that manufacturing requires design. So I'm a chemical engineer. I couldn't graduate from the University of Tennessee unless I could design a heat exchanger and a distillation column. And I still can. But I never put that to practice. But I'm just shocked how few companies design their supply chain and don't focus on form and function of inventory and don't really test through simulation. And we set ourselves up for what we have today.
Excellent point, Greg.
Yep. Companies are so marketing driven these days. And I have always argued that particularly retailers and maybe some of these now B2C brands, they should focus on what they're good at, which is designing products. It is marketing those products. And it is perhaps, I don't know if it's outsourcing, but it is finding a different team of professionals to manage a different team of professionals to manage the supply chain practice. And to Laura's earlier point, we need to redefine risk management, the way we understand risk management, because I think people think of it as those things. Does somebody have good credit? But one of the best statements I ever got around supply chain, and I still use this to this day, is assume everyone will fail you. Then you have the appropriate risk management understanding and stance. You have to provision for every single possible failure or likely failure
Yes.
in the supply chain. And that is what we fail to do in supply chain, is to provision for failure.
Yes. It reminds me, and Greg, with your connection, we got a little max headroom going here. So I love that. All we need is the zigzag 80s graphics, and we'll have the whole enchilada.
I don't even know what you guys are seeing. So, and I'm
No,
like 10 minutes. I feel like I'm 10 minutes behind you.
So what's funny though is where I got my start really in supply chain was on the people and the staffing side. I had a large industrial and really logistics focused staffing company bring me to Atlanta way back when, before kids, before all kind of meaningful bills, all that stuff. And really I had a leader within the company that said, look, we're in the people business. People are going to let you down, and you just got to embrace it. They're not going to show up. They're going to pass the interview and then not show up on the first day, not even call you. You just got to embrace it and be prepared with a backup plan. So Greg, kind of along the lines of what you shared there. I like to believe in people. So naturally that was not a good mindset for me to embrace, but it was part of what happens in that business. I want to share a couple of things here. Brandy says, and agrees with both of you, we need to look at risks as a whole instead of in silos: cost, quality, compliance, etc. It all matters. And I think both of y'all were speaking to that point. Aditya, welcome back, Aditya. Great to have you as part of the live stream here today. Redesigning supply chains, not just being efficient, but also responsive at the same time. Need to achieve that balance. You want to speak to that for a second, Laura?
Well, I say to folks, they typically have 5 to 7 supply chains based upon rhythms and cycles. And there is a need for an efficient supply chain where you have very low demand variability and you can manage it. But there's also a need for a responsive supply chain, which is very short cycle. And there's a need for an agile supply chain that is really dealing with high demand variability and low volume. But a supply chain struggles to be efficient, responsive, and agile at the same time. It is a choice. You can have combinations of response, but most people aren't clear on the definitions, and most people don't design, and most people don't identify their supply chains on rhythms and cycles. And that whole area is an opportunity for most people. They throw the words around, I can't tell you the number of supply chain professionals that send me their really pretty slick documents that say they want to have an end-to-end supply chain that's efficient, responsive, and agile. And I just say, bullshit, you don't understand supply chain. What is an end? What is an end? And your supply chain, you need to make a choice, right? If you're all about low cost, you need to have very low variability in both demand and supply. And that's not the case for most people.
As Clay says, boom, mic drop, Laura. Excellent point there.
Sorry.
Hey, you tell it like it is. I appreciate that. I think that's a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
I think we'd all benefit greatly so by having more folks tell it like it is, rather than give us the corporate fluff that is so prevalent. All right. So John Thornberry says the chase for lowest piece price is a race to the bottom. No organization wins in this race because total costs increase as a function of distance in supply chain. Excellent point there. I like what Barbara says here. Barbara, welcome to the live stream. Our supply network designs are perfectly designed or not designed to give us precisely the results we are getting today. Greg, how about that?
I'm not sure I quite follow that. Our supply chain networks designs are perfectly designed or not designed to give us precisely the result. Well, I think she's impugning our supply chain network designs, right? Must be what she's talking about.
I read that.
What we're getting today is not what we're after, clearly.
Well, what I took on Barbara's comment there is that we're getting what we designed for.
Right.
We're not, if we design ABC and we get ABC, it's kind of, it's our fault if ABC is not what we want. Laura, speak to that.
Yeah.
Well, the supply chain is a complex nonlinear system, and most people, manage the supply chain on an Excel spreadsheet, which an Excel spreadsheet is not sufficient because you can't see the trade-offs and you can't just look at costs. You need to look at margin. And if you reward the organization for functional incentives like purchase price variance or OEE in manufacturing or lowest transportation cost, you throw the supply chain out of balance and you get what we've got.
Agreed. Excellent point there. I want to share. Gosh, we got a bunch of comments. I'm trying to get
got them
all
going now.
Yes, it got juices going on everybody here. Chia says the one who wants everything is the one who doesn't understand supply chain. Good point there, Sylvia. Greg, how do you say that?
I can't read it.
Okay, Laura.
She said bullshit in German. That's what it is.
I gotta brush up on my German too, evidently. Sylvia, glad you're here with us.
There's
Sandy,
some keywords you need to know. Schweinhund.
Sandy, great to have you here.
Interesting. I wasn't calling you that, by the way. That's a keyword to know.
Sandy says, interesting how two of my passions have come to an intersection of roads. And she says, supply chain now, all roads lead to supply chain. Very true. Or maybe Sandy said that. Y'all have to clarify. I'm trying to keep up with all the comments here. Go back to what Barbara shared a minute ago. She's saying the designs are piecemealed and not intentional. Laura, you're nodding your head. Agreed?
Yeah, most of the network design work is ad hoc and it's a piece of the supply chain, and people are not intentional on the building of the supply chain response. So I agree with Barbara, and it takes great leadership to rise above and say the supply chain is malleable. It's something I design, and the interrelationships of metrics in the supply chain drive behavior. And I can't just manage it, on an Excel spreadsheet or manage it based on the supply chain I inherited. And designing the flows is very different than designing the bricks and mortar.
So, gosh, so much to talk about, so little time. We blink and it's almost 12:52 now.
It's first cocktail time.
It is. That's right. Hey, a couple other comments here. Rhonda says, there's an old time song, Tell It Like It Is, or was it Tell Me Like It Is? So many relatable topics here to think about today. I agree with you. And Clay, yes. It is. Yeah, that's it. That's it. I think it's the Eagles or something. Clay, agreed. Very lively one. And yes, Azalea, you ask and you shall receive. So we were talking about the 2020 supply chains to admire, which is more of a research piece, which is where can folks of course, you've got a webinar where it's kind of a release party and recognition party, but where can folks go, Laura, to access that?
So the Supply Chains to Admire is a PDF that I sent you, which we can drop in the chat. Every year I write an ebook, which is available on Amazon and Flipping Book. And I have 2 hard copy books, one on the metrics that matter about managing the complex nonlinear system called supply chain. And the first one is called Bricks Matter, which is a historic look at the prior 2 decades of supply chain. And my third book, which will be about supply chain leadership, will publish sometime in the next couple of years. That's what I'm working on now.
Wonderful. And hey, we'll make it easy. So I don't have a way of posting an attachment in the comments, but hey, shoot a note to Amanda at Supply Chain Now, and we'll send you a copy of the 2020 Supply Chains to Admire. And we'll also work to get that in our newsletter to help disseminate what is really outstanding research that is, again, unbeholden, right? It's independent. It's funded, I believe, completely by your company, Supply Chain Insights. And so you can really be that independent voice. So I love that, Laura. Okay. So one more comment here from Brandy. Design thinking needs to be part of supply chain business operations and not just engineering. Excellent point. Excellent point.
I could talk a whole show about design thinking, but I'm going to save it. But Scott, please remind people in the chat to consider taking our study on analytics. That is one of the studies that we're closing. We'd love to have people's voice on that study.
Excellent point. And Amanda, if we can, I think we do have a link for that. Again, and to expound a bit on that, we'd love to have your inputs, your experiences, your expertise on analytics into this next piece of research that Laura and her team are building out. And again, your inputs will help the outputs be even more impactful that are open source for the industry to get better and learn from. So it looks like we're dropping that link into the comments. That was really quick. Thank you very much, Amanda or Clay, who did that. Okay, so Laura, we touched on Project Zebra, but one quick, anything else you want to add with Project Zebra before we bid adieu?
So we do have a website now, and we'll drop that into the link as well. People can sign up for the newsletter. And we're solutioning a market-driven demand management tool to look at how do we have baseline to be able to look at whether we're shifting demand or shaping demand based upon the analytics, and the market-driven knowledge graph, which will allow us to look at a balanced scorecard in real time and look at the impact of the plan and the potential of better planning. So you can follow that on the newsletter.
Wonderful. Hey, and folks, if you love Laura's take, frank, what needs to be said, what should be said. Greg, I can't remember what you don't want to say around that, but more folks need to, I believe more folks need to hear that independent voice and POV. If you enjoy all that, you got a great conference coming up in September. Laura, I believe the dates are the 7th, 8th, and 9th, and it's going to be a hybrid. It's going to be in person and virtual, and there will be a registration link, I think, available just the next few days, week. Right?
Yeah.
Next week.
And I'm happy to partner with you guys to do the live show online, and we're doing a hybrid, so we'll have 100 people in the room, and the people in the room have to have vaccinations, and we'll wear masks and follow the CDC guidelines. But I'm hoping to have a rockin' show online with you guys moderating, and to have some of the speakers come on and have you interview them. And, I'm hoping to have 1,000, 2,000 people online to be able to celebrate with the Supply Chains to Admire winners. We've got focus on new business models and how supply chain can evolve, and some updates on Project Zebra. And I think it's just some great speakers.
Wonderful. Rockin' time. Who knows? Nashville Cats may even make an appearance, Laura. We'll see.
Yeah.
Having spoonfuls, baby.
That's right. Hey, well, Lora Cecere, always a pleasure. Again, we are admirers of yours and your approach here. I think supply chain professionals, practitioners, leaders need all the help they can get to get through these challenging times, right? Fighting old problems and lots of new problems. And I think that open source MO aspect of your approach is a wonderful breath of fresh air. So we look forward to supporting that and continuing our collaboration in the weeks ahead. Thanks so much, Laura.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys. Off
Bye-bye.
for the career cocktail. Bye.
Thanks, Laura.
Greg, she does not miss a thing. In fact, y'all two are a lot alike in that regard. Greg, you never miss anything.
Yes, she's my spirit person. Yes. I'm pretty sure.
So, folks, I know we couldn't get everybody's comments today. Thanks so much for contributing and jumping right into the conversation. That's the great thing about frank conversations, right? I think they do. You can find a lot of kindred spirits when you're really just having a frank kind of supply chain conversation around the kitchen table, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think that we have to acknowledge that we are in the forefront now, and we are going to be in so many conversations. I heard it yesterday again, talking about supply chain, and was just so shocked to hear probably something about the colonial thing, I think, which is not a supply chain issue at all, by the way. That was a panic buying issue. Again, just like toilet paper, we didn't have a supply issue. We had a demand issue.
Well, hey, it is about deeds, not words, which is part of what Greg's touching on there. And folks, get behind this effort, VBA.org, or shoot a note to india@vectorgl.com. We saw Enrique Alvarez with us here today. Appreciate his leadership, his action-based leadership. Also appreciate Laura's talk about action-based leadership. I mean, to invest all that into some heavy hitting research and then open it up for the world to get better, industry to get better. That is, those are leaders that we admire. So Greg, a pleasure. Thanks for making this thing work. I know that you're on the move, making it happen, helping plenty of fellow founders. And I'm glad the technology worked here today.
Somehow we managed to get through it, didn't we?
That's right. Well, hey, big thanks to Amanda and Clay behind the scenes. Big thanks to all the folks that came out for a great conversation. Sign up for that webinar. If you have any problems, find anything we talked about today, shoot us a note, amanda@supplychainnow.com, and we'll help you out. Thanks so much for coming out. Most importantly, hey, on behalf of our entire team, do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And on that note, we'll see you next time right here at Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.